Wow, welcome back, welcome back. So, if you've been with us, hopefully you've been with us all this morning. I've actually been playing a few videos that were wrapping up our Data Cloud World Tours. I played the Singapore video before Chang Boon presented to before, and that was actually the Tokyo one. KT, who you may have seen in the clip there, she was standing next to Denise, our CMO. A little bit of an anime buff, I suspect, because we definitely seem to have quite a strong theme there. Going on with the anime piece, so that was pretty cool. But I'll play some more of those too, which are quite fun. Hopefully, I'm not sure if you managed to join us for any of our Data Cloud World Tours, but they're really fantastic this year. So welcome back. We have got another session coming with us now. We're going to dive into the world of generative AI. We're going to talk a bit about external functions and just sort of dabble a little bit into I guess walking up to some of the Snowflake content. So the first two sessions have been really just giving some fundamentals because we always have lots of folks who are new. We're going to pivot over really onto new things now. Very, very briefly, just for everyone who's here, this is a live event, but I am actually recording at this time. So in case you just joined back for this session, you want to dive into some of the more recent technology. If you're attending today, I'm going to record them. I'll edit up the videos tomorrow night, hopefully get them out to you on Friday. So keep an eye on the email or grab me on LinkedIn and I'll provide those to you. Please keep our Q&A guests nice and busy. You can see that everyone's pretty ready to go and take questions. And watch the Snowday announcements. Please go and check out the Snowday announcements as well. Definitely worth dabbling into. Oops, I'll just resume sharing. Oh, there it goes. Okay, with that, I will stop sharing for a moment. Sean, how are you? Great to see you, and thank you so much for joining us from Australia today.
Thank you, David. I'm well. Dodged the network outage. Heard a little bit on the news. So yeah, everything's all looking good.
Yeah. Actually, interestingly, and just for everyone who's watching, halfway through the interview, if you watch hopefully Natalie and Christian talking, I lost all my internet here in Singapore, which never happens. So I had quite a heart stop. Unfortunately, it magically reconnected. So let's just assume that the live glitches are out of the way, proving to everyone that this is live and that we should be in a good state. So we've sort of now pivoting over into Snowday announcements, and we just wanted to start off with a little bit talking about generative AI and internal functions. So without further ado, Sean, over to you.
Okay, thank you, David. So let me just share my screen real quickly. All right, awesome. So, so good to meet everybody here. So my name is Sean Kim. I'm a solutions engineer for Snowflake based here in Sydney, Australia. And I think for the next 45 minutes, we'll talk through a bit of an introduction into generative AI. Obviously, that's it's a big buzz, it's a big topic at the moment. But we're going to focus a little bit more on how you can implement, implement or bring, some of the benefits of generative AI with a few of the, functions that we have available in Snowflake today around, calling, being able to call external functions directly from the Snowflake Data Cloud. So now, of course, I'll give a bit of an introduction to generative AI. Obviously, I think everybody in this webinar is pretty familiar with what that is at the moment. You can't be in the space without hearing about it every 5 minutes. But obviously, this is a very big it's a very big advancement in this field. So we are really now in this age of generative AI, and it's really changed the way in which we not only enable our teams, but also deliver new and exciting products based on this new technology. But of course, recognizing that AI is not a new concept. Some of that's been around for many decades now, and of course, a lot of the aspects of that, it won't go away for now, right? So if you think about classical AI ML use cases, for all of your things like business forecasting, churn prediction, and all of that, these are things that will always, and these are always will be the mainstay of business analytics. But also, you've seen the advancements in topics like deep learning, being able to, create models and train models based on, unstructured data, everything from video footage to, to images to audio and etc. And a few companies that really truly run web scale, that run at web scale have been able to take advantage of that as well. So, but now I guess the difference with the Gen AI concept is just really opening up the way you can interact with AI in general. So not just in terms of the types of data, but also just an explosion in the kinds of inputs it can accept, and also just the sheer volume of data that these models have been ultimately being trained on. And so as this boom in generative AI is happening, what are really the things that are really going to change the way we move forward? Now, of course, the main tool that everyone knows is ChatGPT, which is a nice, consumer-facing product. But as this year has sort of progressed, we've seen a similar boom in open source models. We hear a new model being pushed out by organizations like Meta, Google, Microsoft, etc. Virtually every other week, right? And they're always improving on things like performance, and just making that more and more accessible as each iteration has been introduced. And with this technology, it's really what's also happening as well is it's really also opening the door to not just run these expensive models that needs to encompass all of the world's knowledge, but there's been an increased focus on very specific models that that only needs to know the data that you might store in your enterprise data warehouse, such as Snowflake, and also be able to be really good at running just specific jobs. So you want to be able to get the benefits of running LLMs on your data, but without the expensive computation that's normally associated with your more consumer facing products like ChatGPT. So what has Snowflake been doing, to be able to, to enable all of your customers to be able to take advantage of this, this rapidly, evolving, generative AI field. And really the big focus of Snowflake is, we really want to make generative AI as accessible as possible for all of our customers. And we want to be able to do that in the most, very secure fashion. So, these are all things that, Snowflake already has built in, and essentially want to bring the same benefits that you're getting with, all of your data analytics that you're already doing on Snowflake, but being able to incorporate, LLMs to really turbocharge, anything that you're doing on Snowflake. And they're kind of breaking that down a little bit further. There are really three key things that we want you to be able to accomplish with the Snowflake platform in the context of generative AI. So first of all, we want you to be able to take advantage of this while protecting your most valuable asset, which is the data that you store on Snowflake. So of course, it's our firm belief that a foundational component of your Gen AI strategy is ultimately your overall data strategy. So it's making sure your data, which is your most valuable asset, and that and the models that you train and tune with the data that you actually have, that remains protected, and it's not going off into external locations that where you effectively lose control of what's happening with that data. Now, we also want to be able to expand adoption of Gen AI beyond just a select group of AI experts who really know how these models work in and out. So because a lot of the value can be untapped without there's a lot of value that you can get out of the data with tools like LLM that shouldn't require any custom development, having to hand roll your own models or all that rest of it. And ultimately, from the developer's point of view, it also helps your developers focus on development, right? So there's going to be an explosion in use cases where you might have some specific requirements. They might still require a little bit of custom development, and we want, as a platform, to be able to ensure that it essentially gets out of the way. Remove complexities, things around infrastructure, security, resource planning, and etc., so that your developers who are busy making these generative AI use cases happen, they can do that in a seamlessly and secure fashion. So now this is essentially an overview of all of the generative AI related features that's available in Snowflake. So some of these features are quite exciting. They're quite new, only announced in the last week or so. But just going from left to right, you've got your ready built AI that's ready to tackle specific use cases, whether it's document AI, whether you want to extract information from, unstructured data such as, PDFs, Word documents, and like images, and etc. And of course, you've heard our recent announcements around universal search, where you can, let Snowflake users, quickly discover, data and applications stored on your Snowflake account with natural language. You can ask a question, and you'll flag where that data might sit, as well as, of course, you might have heard of Snowflake Copilot as well. So it's essentially your LLM powered assistant that will help you, write out SQL, SQL statements based on the natural language inputs that you provide. So it's a great, productivity tool for anybody that's developing on Snowflake. And of course, we've got our Snowflake Cortex, which gives you a little bit more access under the hood into pre-built industry-leading generative LLM models, such as Meta's Llama 2 models, and Snowflake's also bringing more and more models as we speak. Models that are more tuned for specific use cases. Now, what we're going to talk about mostly are maybe the stuff on the right there. So, of course, if you want to bring your own model, if you already have a model that's ready to go, or if you want to interact with an external service, for example, the OpenAI's API services, you've got a range of options there as well. So if you've got your own LLM logic good to go, you could deploy that with Snowpark's container services, which lets you host containers entirely within Snowflake, and then you can run inference jobs and all that rest of it, and without any of that data leaving the Snowflake platform. Or in the demo that we'll be talking about in a moment, you can also have your Snowflake code and logic be able to interact with an external API location that's hosting the models as well. So I'll now go into a quick demo. It's just going to showcase a few different the methods in which you can have your Snowflake code reach out an external location. In this case, reaching out to OpenAI's APIs, and then retrieve the results of the inference back into your Snowflake platform. So before I go into the demo, I'll take you through a couple of the features that will effectively make that integration happen. So firstly, you've got your external functions. So this is not a new feature that's been in GA for some time now, but this is your way you can bind SQL functions. So any SQL function you run in Snowflake, you can bind that to an implementation that lives outside of Snowflake. So this primarily needs to interact with an API gateway from one of the three main cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and GCP. So typically you need to mediate by a service like API gateway, and then from there you can plug any type of service, any type of custom logical code that you've got in one of these platforms, and then be able to interact with external services that way. So this is one of the, of course, LLM inferencing is obviously the use case we'll be touching here in this demo. But for anything from custom logic, whether you need to route events to different services, there's SaaS services, for example. If you want to do classical ML scoring, geocoding, all that rest of it, essentially, you're only limited by what you can essentially write in those external services. Now, a more recent development that we pushed out that's currently in public preview on our AWS edition and private preview on our Azure edition of Snowflake is Snowpark's external network access. So now what that lets you do is have all of your Python or Java stored procedures or user-defined functions call external network locations directly without having to require any additional services in your cloud service provider. So there's no requirement for an API gateway. There's no service. You don't need to set up another service or anything like that. You just need to create the integration entirely within Snowflake. We have constructs for being able to store and retrieve secrets as well. So it's nice and secure. And then this will let you call those locations directly within Snowflake. So it's very convenient. It's very easy to get started. And of course, you've got the same use cases there around, calling LLMs and etc. But you can build things like connectors or, being able to route events into SaaS products, or, essentially you've got a wide range of use cases available through the external functions feature, network access feature, I should say. Okay, and I'll show you a few. I'll be obviously showcasing an example of each of these methods, but what we'll use to tie this together is our Streamlit in Snowflake solution. So if you haven't heard of Snowflake before, so it's an open source Python library that will let Python developers develop rich interactive applications very, very quickly within Snowflake without requiring any, specialized front-end knowledge or even knowledge about, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and the rest of it. So Streamlit provides a range of different methods to, build out widgets that will handle inputs and outputs, all of the interactivity with things like buttons and etc., or even, be able to output, results of the interactivity, whether it's, tables or visualizations or, all those kinds of things. So what we'll be doing in this demo is to surface some of those network interactions into a nice little UI interface so that you can, give this to your business stakeholders. They can interact with the models without having to even log into the Snowflake platform. And really, the big benefit of this Streamlit in Snowflake solution is one. I'll talk a little bit about ease of developing the application, but it's also, it also makes the deployment very, very easy for you, and that's because Snowflake will essentially host all of that application for you. So there's no worrying about infrastructure requirements, scaling requirements, having to lock it down with, with authentication or anything like that. It's essentially using the same Snowflake storage and compute and all of the data governance and security considerations that's already available to you as a Snowflake customer. Okay, and this is a rough flow of what this demo will look like. So you've got your Snowflake account, you might have some data in there, and you want to enrich some of that data with, LLM inferencing. And for this really simple scenario, we're going to be interacting with OpenAI's APIs that will essentially let you send prompts into API's various models. You might have heard about the GPT models and etc. And then enrich our data with these APIs. So talked a little bit, and I'll talk a little about Streamlit. So we're going to have, I'll show you case a Streamlit application that will essentially serve as the front-end UI to essentially interact with these LLM models. So in terms of the first method, so we've got our external function set up. And as I mentioned, with external functions, they require an API gateway service. So in this case, we'll use AWS's API gateway. This will essentially route the events directly into the APIs to send that as a request, and then it will then translate the response back into our Snowflake account. Now, of course, you can put other services behind that API gateway as well. So show you a quick example where you take, again, you send that the prompt that you send through an external function via an API gateway, but this time into a Lambda function, which then routes that request to the OpenAI, gets the results back, and then returns that back into Snowflake. So this is obviously when you've got a little bit more of a complex logic that can't be, that's not simply just passing through the event. If you've got more complex logic, if you've got extra data enrichment and whatnot, this is one way you can achieve that as well. And for our third approach, I will show you how you can actually just call an OpenAI APIs directly with Snowpark external network access. So it's all, I'll show you all of the code, all of the secret setup, and how you can actually call an API service directly from a Python UDF that's deployed directly onto Snowflake. Great, awesome. So I'll just go into our Snowflake platform. So I'll show you, so I've got 3 worksheets open, one representing each of the different methods. So talk a little bit briefly about, what's exactly involved here. So now, firstly, going into our external functions. So first option, external function directly into a API gateway, and that hits the OpenAI APIs. So we simply create an API integration object, which is essentially a bridge between Snowflake and an external API location. We're going to select AWS API gateway as our location, and then we need to provide a couple of ways, because obviously a Snowflake needs to programmatically access the API gateway that we developed on our AWS account. So I'm going to specify our prefix. So this is an API gateway that I've created earlier, and this is the invoke endpoint, and then as well as a role ARN. So if you're familiar with establishing connection with Amazon S3, it's pretty similar in concept. You get the, with things like storage integration, so you get the external ID, the AWS principal that Snowflake uses. You just import that into the model as a trust relationship, and then that's how you create that integration between Snowflake and AWS API gateway. So I've already created that. I think created that invalidates a few things, so I'll just keep pressing on ahead. Now, because we're sending events directly into an API, we need to structure that in a way, structure the request as well as the response in a way that both Snowflake and OpenAI expects or understands. So we've got create a specific function to translate the request. So we're going to send our prompt, and we're going to wrap that in this JSON payload here. So add that into the prompt. We're going to specify which model that we want to call. So in this case, this is a text DaVinci 003 model, which is one of the models stored in that's hosted on OpenAI. And then we're going to input a couple of different parameters here. So that's going to translate the request. So that's the events that's been sent from Snowflake to OpenAI. So once then it hits the OpenAI APIs, it sends a response back with all the essentially its answer. We then need to translate the response as well. So we've got another function to essentially take the array of API responses, unpack that into another JSON object, and then returns that back into Snowflake. So bringing all of that together, with those functions and the integration, we're going to now create our external function. So external functions, call it OpenAI ext func. And then we're going to specify our API integration, max batch rows. So if you run a function against a table, of course, it needs to run against all of the rows in a particular table. So this will specify the batch size, how many it's going to try to run at the same time. So it's a good way of speeding up the Snowflake side of batching these operations. I'm going to specify two translators, our request translator, response translator. And then and in the as clause, we'll specify the API endpoint. It will be the API endpoint that goes to the API gateway. So that's already been created. So I'm just going to call this like you would in SQL, like you would with any other Snowflake function. So I'm just going to ask a very simple question, classify the sentiment. So it's a bit of like, think of your classic sentiment analysis use case. So it's going to say Snowflake is really awesome, get that response back and see what it says. Awesome. It was really quick. So it just goes in and translates that sentiment, and then it's telling me the sentiment is positive, right? It's probably just picks up a couple of those positive keywords and determine that the sentiment is positive. So that's all looking good. Now, for our second option, we're going to now do much more or less the same thing, but this time we've got a lot of the transformation logic, the stuff we had in our the request and response translators, but we've implemented that in AWS Lambda. So it's a little bit simpler from Snowflake side, but there is an additional step you need to set up in AWS. So this time I've got, just to show you an example where you can run inferences against a particular table, we're going to create a table of LLM prompts, and we're going to populate that with a couple of predetermined prompts that will run that inference against. So we're going to insert these two values in. So these are a little bit of a different prompts this time. So these are these are more kind of productivity type of use cases where you might be an analyst who's kind of wondering how you can write a certain query. So you're going to create a SQL statement to, for example, find all users in your data who live in California and have over 1,000 credits. Or you can do more specific stuff like being able to specify your what do you call it? The table schema. So you can maybe extract this from the data you store in Snowflake. And then the prompt following that based on the schema that you just sent. So now, much like the previous example, so we're going to create an API integration. So along with the AWS role, the what do you call it? The API endpoint as well. I'm not going to recreate that. And then this time, you don't need any translators. I'll show you that Lambda in a moment. You just simply create that external function, give it an LLM function, and it's going to interact. It's going to hit that endpoint directly. So now, while that's this might take 2 seconds, it might take 2 minutes. It just depends on what the traffic is on OpenAI at the moment. So it might take a little bit longer. So while that's going, I'm just going to open up AWS Lambda to show you essentially what's going on here. So this is the function I just created on my AWS account. So you've got, it should have fired an event into API gateway by now, and then that will route the event into our Lambda function. So much like in the previous example, we had some of the translators. You got the Lambda code here that it's all in Python. It's all doing all that translation and handling the request and the response for you. So obviously this gives you a lot more freedom in terms of what you can, what you can do in this code. You can hit other services, you can enrich it with other sources of data, etc. So for sort of complex use cases where you might need, you need to do additional processing, this is a really good approach for that. So this is unpacking each of the each of the prompts. So as you know, it batches the calls as well. So if you've got multiple prompts, it will then go grab each one, use the OpenAI's chat completion method, call the GPT-4 model, and then get the response from the model there. Cool. So I'll flick back here. Cool. So we've got a response back. Took about 20 seconds. Not too bad. So here we can see all of our the prompts we had in our prompts table, and then in the response from OpenAI with all the information there. So this just gave me, this one gave me a simple example. As an analyst, I can then go and copy that, put that into my worksheet, and then have fun. And you can also get more detailed response. If you use ChatGPT, you might get something a little bit similar to this, where it'll give you the example, give you that explanation, and then you can learn something from that as well. It's really cool. And then finally, with our third option, we'll be showing you our Snowpark and external network access. So this one's a little bit different this time because all of that integration. So I didn't show you a lot of the steps on AWS with the previous two functions, but in this step where we're doing, we're creating that integration entirely with Snowpark. All of that integration is done entirely within Snowflake. So there's no CloudFormation templates. There's no, you don't have to spin up, API gateways or lambdas or anything like that. It's a very easy way to get started. So you've got you're going to set our context, just using a database schema, compute warehouse, the usual. And then we're going to create our integration here. So first of all, just taking a step back. So with OpenAI's, you can sign up for the API servers. You can send credit. You can purchase credits, and it'll give you an API key that you can use for programmatic access. So I've got that here. Feel free to use it, but I'm going to go ahead and revoke that after my session's done. So that's it. So what this secret object will do is it will store that information for you, and then you can access it programmatically through your Python or Java UDFs or stored procedures. So this will essentially keep that locked up in that object. This way, you don't have to expose your API keys or even passwords or OAuth tokens and things like that. You can keep that in the storage, and you never have to expose that directly in the code. So next, we'll create a network rule. So that's an OpenAI API network rule. So this will essentially whitelist a particular external network location for you. So obviously everything is opt-in. So this will only so by default, all Python code or Python Java code does not have any network access, outbound network access whatsoever. So this is all opt-in. So here we're just going to whitelist our api.openai.com. So we'll create that rule there. And then tying the network rule and the secrets together, we're going to then create our external access integration. So we're going to specify our network rules, our authentication secrets. So we're just going to specify those two objects that we just created, enabled. So we've now created our integration. And then now we're going to implement a couple of methods. So these are UDFs, Python UDFs. So the stuff you might have saw in that Lambda code before, but this is now brought directly into Snowflake. So it's very simple. So you just need to, of course, with our function definition, you need to specify the external access. this secrets, which will then map the secrets object that we just created earlier, and then map that into a Python object that we can essentially use that to extract the secrets before sending the API call. So to get the secrets information, you just import this underscore Snowflake Python package. And then use one of its methods to evaluate and get the API keys from that object. Then we use the OpenAI package like we did in the Lambda example to specify a model. In this version, we're going to use GPT 3.5. And then we're just going to use it again, like in the last example, use the OpenAI method to call that API and then return that response back. So that's the ChatGPT 3.5 version. And then we got the same version here, but this time with ChatGPT 4, which is essentially a more powerful version. Let's let that run. Okay, so it just needs to translate that Python code into Python bytecode, and then Snowflake essentially hosts that for you and then runs that whenever you need it. So I'm just going to create that for ChatGPT 4. I think I created that earlier, so I don't need to run that again. But you can run. Let's run this as an example. So we've got our function ChatGPT 4. You're going to add a prompt here that just asks it to write a SQL query that generates a dummy table with 100 records. So I do this all the time when I just want to do if I want to just try something really quick, but I just want to populate with some dummy data, and it can be a little bit, don't always remember how to exactly do that. So this is a good way to, get code that you can just, plug and play, right? Okay, so here we got our response. So like with that last example, it gives a nice response, nicely formatted this time, with the SQL commands, and then it teaches you what each of these are doing. So now that's all well and good, but it's probably it's a bit of a hassle, going into a worksheet, especially if you're a user that's not maybe a little bit less technical. You don't want to have to go through all these steps just to be able to get a simple SQL query out, right? So what I've gone and done is created a Streamlit application that will have each of those three methods, and then expose that into an interactive Streamlit application. So if you've got Streamlit enabled on your account, on your UI, you should see a Streamlit section here. So go Streamlit, and creating an application is super simple. So you just hit this create Streamlit app button, just give it a name, give it a warehouse. So this is the same warehouse you use for ingesting data, transforming data, creating machine learning models, etc. In this case, it is this warehouse that is going to host the Streamlit application for you. So you don't need to bring any VMs or anything like that. It's essentially it's hosted entirely by Snowflake. Now, I've already got an application developed, deployed here, so I just called it OpenAI. It's just booting up, loading all the dependencies and etc. And then from here, you can see the code that's used to generate that application as well. So the whole application is developed in about 60 lines of code, and it's really just using the same same external functions and the Python UDFs that we created earlier. So that you can see some of the calls here. So it's just taking the inputs that we just put our prompts into these input fields. It then calls these external locations and then retrieves the response, and then it'll give you the response. So I'll just do a quick sentiment analysis example. So this was our first example I showed you with just the API gateway solution. Let's say Snowflake is awesome. I think I asked this one before, but give that a go. His sentiment, I don't know where that T went, but but I think that we got our answer. The sentiment is positive, so that's all looking good. So every time you send a new prompt, it'll then hit the external location, get that response back. So really nice and interactive. Going to a second example. So this is a shared knowledge piece. So this is more or less how you use ChatGPT. So I'll just ask, tell me about Snowflake Data Cloud. Great. So this might take a little bit longer. Last time I did this, it took a minute. It just purely depends on how much traffic OpenAI is getting at the time. But again, this one I believe is using the Lambda solution. So it's gone off and sent this prompt, just the prompt into the API gateway. It gets routed into the Lambda function. It then calls the OpenAI's, I think, the ChatGPT-4, I believe, and then returns that results back, and then it's going to hopefully give us some insights in the next moment or so. Okay, so this time's a little bit on the slow side, but I'll show you a little bit about while that's going. Show you about the API gateway as well. So is this one. So we've got our AIRN here. So essentially you've got our client. In this case, this is the Snowflake external function. It's sending the request, the integration request, HTTP integration, which we set up as the OpenAI API endpoint, and then it's just sending that response back. The client does a translation of that response and then relays that information back into Snowflake. So see how that's going. Okay, I might just have to kill it and restart it. That's okay. Let that run. So that one's a little bit slow for some reason, but that's okay. So now with those SQL prompts that we asked them that we inserted into that table, so create an SQL statement, etc. You can populate that into a select box, and then you can run inferences based on that as well. So that same question I asked earlier, that's a lot faster this time. So it's a SQL statement. Interestingly, this time it gave an explanation as well as the query. I'm sure there's a way of influencing that, but you can refine it. Now, of course, if you bring your own solutions, of course you have a lot tighter control about what kind of outputs you can send out as well. And then flip to the other one. This is where you can, for example, take the schema out of a table that you store in Snowflake, send the schema information, ask a question based on that schema, and then get an example query based on that question. Okay, we might be in a bit of a peak period. Oh, there we go. I spoke too soon. So yeah, so I think this is a very similar response we got last time of running that right from this Snowflake worksheet. So you got our SQL example SQL query, an explanation about what that query is about. So you can now go and take this and go and answer whatever question you need out of your Snowflake data. Cool. So that's everything I wanted to show you in terms of this demo. Now, the cool thing about this demo is this is all available in our, let me just turn this. So these are all available in our one of our Snowflake's quick starts. So if you just follow this link here, so you just look for getting started with the same title, getting started with generative AI and external functions. It will then essentially take you to a step-by-step process where you can actually go through each of those three methods, including setting up the AWS components of it. And so you can essentially recreate this yourself, and then you can customize that with other tools that you might have developed, or or any other customizations you'd like. And as well as all of the relevant documentation for our external functions feature, as well as our external network access. Cool. So I think that's time. Yeah, I'll throw it back to you, David.
I think that's awesome. I'm just going to leave your links up on the screen. So folks, you want to grab your camera. I don't have these in a nice QR code yet, but maybe grab your camera and snap those, because there was a few questions about where can I get it? How can I read more about it? Where can we access this? So there it is on screen. We've got a couple of questions. I can see that Marco's got a few queued up here to be live, which is good. And also too, just for everyone listening, you heard Natalie say to Christian, hey, we saw each other last week. And the reason that was is because Natalie had and the entire APJ team over, which means that Marco, Sean, a bunch of the teams have been diving into all these new announcements last week. So there you go. So a little bit of forgiveness there as we go through. A lot of this is actually really, really new. Some, obviously we announced some of this functionality a little while ago. A lot of it's in private preview or coming. So watch Snow. If you've got questions about what's coming where and what's available, do watch the Snowday replay, because Christian outlines quite clearly like what's coming when. But Sean, you're very keen, thanks, or very, I guess, supportive for coming on and taking questions on the fly, given you were at an offsite diving into the latest stuff last week, which is awesome. So we really have got this though, as it comes. So there was a couple here, Mark, I saw you type one out here from Aidan. He said, I'm guessing the length of the response message from the external AI API is bound by a maximum length allowed to a variable character or data type. So he's sort of asking about, is there a length or control over the responses you're getting?
Yep. So I can answer that. So the answer is yes. So it's limited by the maximum length of a varchar if you're going to respond, if you get the response as a varchar. So, but one alternative you could go for is return that as an object or variant. So with variants you get up to 16 megabytes. So over the entire body. So you can do quite a lot in those 16 megabytes. But yes, to answer that question, you are essentially limited by the ultimate size of the response. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Marco's also bubbled another up here from Vinette. Vinette asks, and thanks Vinette, I saw you on earlier in the sessions as well. Can we use this generative AI capability integrated into coding scripts to assist us with ETL code completion within Snowflake? So that's kind of first part. And the second part is, and also he assumes the OpenAI API calls are hosted within the Snowflake client's environment and data is not sent out. So sort of a security question on the back of it.
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, so that's actually not showcased within this demo, but it is one of our it will be a part of one of our new recent announcements. Once we did just dived into last week, so around the Snowflake Copilot. So it's essentially it will help you with ETL code completion and a lot of the features I talked about. Where you popped in, can you write me SQL code? In this example, we used OpenAI, but when Snowflake Copilot is available, it will be completely native within Snowflake. So all within the UI, very simple to use. So that is that capability. And so with this OpenAI API call, so at the moment, OpenAI's APIs are all hosted externally. So these are just your public API, OpenAI APIs. You just sign up, get your API key, and then you just have these different methods to be able to call those endpoints externally. So with this solution, if you do have an external function or Python network access function that sends data, you are sending some of that data to OpenAI. So that's just something you have to be a little bit careful about. But I think the future is really in some of the other if that is sort of a concern, we do have a range of solutions that's coming very soon as well that will essentially make sure the data never leaves the Snowflake network, and all of the LLMs are hosted within your Snowflake boundary as well.
Yeah, definitely take a look at the Snowday video, and I'll flash that QR code up in a second, Vinette, because Christian talks specifically about Snowflake's implementation, which is ours, staying in our environment, talks about where he started, and it is a start. It's not going to be every language, everywhere, everything, but he has some fairly big goals, and he paints it out quite clearly. So definitely worth looking at that one. Let me have a look here. I think we answered those two. Let me just go back and have a look at the questions I've got. Maybe. Okay, and Bob. Sorry, I'm just cruising to the questions here, Sean. Let me see the documentation. Okay, the documentation, we covered that. Actually, there's one here from Bond. Bond asks, are there any plans for Snowflake to host their own models for inferencing that rank highly for classification and code-based tasks, rather than using more generic model through OpenAI's API? It's a mouthful. It'd be cool to see native code assistant and traits in Snowflake. So it's kind of in the same thing, but it also talks about he mentions models, right? So do we have plans for other models or tune models? How's that all going to look?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and I think I think you really touched on a really big difference between kind of your consumer facing models like OpenAI, which is, has a lot of variance, which you actually saw in this demo as well, compared to, the kinds of use cases that might come out of deploying an LLM on your enterprise data, right? So you might have these are all, of course, specific to your particular industry. It could be specific to your particular business and your own set of business rules. So really our big focus going into making these LLMs more accessible with your Snowflake data is in a more very specific LLMs designed for specific topics. So, the really good examples are the sort of the features I talked about. So the Snowflake Copilot for your, analyst productivity use cases, Document AI, which is very specialized for extracting information out of PDF invoices and etc. But we will be adding more and more very specific LLMs that you can use right out of the box, or you can sort of tune that for your particular use cases. So it's just going to be great for the particular use cases that you prescribe it, rather than being this big all-encompassing general purpose AI that might not even get you there.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. So I think at that point, we've actually exhausted most of the questions through here. So I guess, Sean, I just want to thank you again for coming on. As I said, you literally, and also to Chang Boon and Marco, and everyone was kind of tied up last week, jumped off a plane. David was like, oh my goodness, we've got to be at Discover this week. So thank you for jumping on and taking on the session. Also, thank you just for, taking us through. It's a really interesting area. This whole notion of making it simple to run up these inferences, build these models, fire interesting preset functions at them, rather than have to go and build a bunch of infrastructure. It's really, for me, I think it really captured, solidified in my mind what we were trying to do, compared to, Summit was interesting. We had a bunch of announcements, but now you can kind of see where we're going to. I've put back on screen again the QR code. So if you would like to capture, and I'd encourage you, I've watched a couple of times, it's really good stuff, particularly the demos in the middle there. Go and take a look at that one. It's well worth it. Hopefully you'll feel the same when you've actually viewed it, but I got a lot out of watching Snowday this year, just kind of what our announcements are, heading towards. Couple of quick ones before we wrap up too. If you're interested in getting your Essentials badge, particularly if maybe you're in one of the earlier sessions and you're newer to Snowflake, this is a guided delivery that comes from our enablement team. There's a QR code you can see in the top here to go and scan. So I hope lots of QR codes today. I went a bit crazy. Guess who subscribed to a QR code generator that does Snowflake colors. So now everything's in QR codes. So have a look at that, the QR code there, but you can go and have a look at Ascent or share that to your friends if you'd like to. And that will be running free of charge, which is awesome. If you'd like to get on the other end much deeper into material, this is all new, so each time we run these, we get more and more information. There is our Build conference coming up very, very soon. You can just simply Google Snowflake Build. Pardon me, it's a global conference coming up in December. I've seen a lot of the content that's coming there, and awesome stuff, like going much newer, material, as literally we're writing this for Snowday and it's coming out the door, so you'll get a deeper insight into that. It's 2 days worth of content, very much focus on builders and also developer builders. So if that's kind of you and you're looking at creating various interesting solutions with data, that's well worth a look. Just very, very finally, quick starts, we mentioned before, the LLM quick starts up there now, so you can actually go and take a look at that one on quickstarts.com. Want to chat to the community, want to get questions and answers, definitely join the community. And I just put the links up to our learning site too, which you can cover the badges. So just a quick plug for all those assets there.